afternoon, everybody. I took a picture of the audience because my husband is always convinced that nobody's going to come to a panel that I'm moderating. So now I can tell him we had a nice full house. I'm Ann Kirschner, and welcome to Breaking Down the False Dichotomy of College or Career. I don't think it's going to be a surprise to anybody in this room that we are at a crossroads about how the public feels about the value of a college degree and the relationship between going to college and having a career. But the dichotomy is actually relatively new. If I look back to my own life, when I graduated from high school, the question for me wasn't whether I would go to college or why I would go to college. It was how I was going to go to college and where I was going to go to college. I was a first-generation immigrant family applicant, and my parents made it absolutely clear I could go wherever I wanted as long as the tuition was free. And so that led me to the State University of New York at Buffalo. Anybody from Buffalo here? Absolutely no one. Okay, but the calculus for going to college is really very different today, and our purpose is going to be to talk about how we move from that either-or mentality to a both-and. We've got an all-star cast joined by Maria Anguiano from Arizona State, Lisa Gevelber from Grow with Google, and Shavar Jeffries from the KIPP Foundation. And in our pre-call, one of you mentioned that the fact that we have someone from post-secondary, someone from business, and someone from K-12 on the same panel shows that we actually are making progress in thinking about the interrelatedness of all of these. They're no longer distinct swim lanes, but they're part of this educational ecosystem. Let me start out by asking you what drew you to this mission and how you think about this shift from the either or to the both and Maria, we'll start with you.
Yeah. Thanks, Ann. It's funny, I was relating to you about your comment about your husband, because I was thinking, my mom only has a 6th grade education, and so she's always asked, she doesn't quite understand what I do, and so when I go to a conference, she's like, wait, they pay you to go talk? It's just unbelievable. Like, she just can't wrap her head around that. So one day I'll have to bring her to a conference so she could see what I do. But
or I'll show her my picture.
Yeah, you can show her the picture. But for me, it was tough to even conceptualize going to college, that was an option for me. And everything about it was a black box, whether it was applying, how much it was going to cost. What the heck is a major, right? Going to a college campus for the first time when I had already applied, right? And the only reason I applied was because I ended up getting brochures in the mail. I mean, it was really a complete black box. And so I've always been really passionate about opening up that black box. And not just that, but seeing how right now, for the majority of folks, there's like one pathway. And there's so many people that, from my community, where only about 10% of us went to college, that fell off that path, and there were no other options to get back on an educational path. And so it's really a passion for me to think about how do we create alternative pathways, different ways to think about. I think everyone needs learning, and it's just a matter of, it's not just, well, it may be that a residential experience isn't for everyone, but I think post-secondary learning is for everyone. And it's up to colleges and universities to figure out how to do that differently now to make it more flexible.
And for me personally, so my father and his brother were the first in their family to ever go to college, and my brothers and I all put ourselves through college. So quite similar, I think, in a lot of ways to your stories. And for Google, so I work for Google, and we created a Google Career Certificate program to help people get trained and certified for high-quality jobs. And we started on that journey because we looked at the data that says basically 80% of jobs in our country that pay more than $35,000 a year say they require a college degree. But what percent of Americans do you guys think have one? I heard 25, I heard 6. 36. Yeah, it's about a third. About a third of Americans get a college degree. So we have this huge mismatch in our country and similar mismatches around the world. Where essentially 80 million Americans, 80 million adult workers in our country are locked out of good jobs. And at Google, we thought, well, that's a big, hard problem. We like big, hard problems. What could we do to help solve it? And that's why we started creating our Google Career Certificate program.
Yeah, so for me, I'm a first-generation college grad. I'm from the great city of Newark, New Jersey. I don't know if we have Newark in the house. We didn't have Buffalo, so I don't know if we have too much Newark in the house. So I'm from a community of giants. I'm from a community of geniuses and brilliant people who are amazing and who kind of put me on their back. But they didn't have the opportunity to go to college. And I did because I got this scholarship when I was in 8th grade to go to this college prep high school. That was an all-boys Catholic high school in West Orange, New Jersey. I didn't want to go to this all-boys Catholic high school, but I got this scholarship from the Boys and Girls Clubs of Newark, and my grandmother said, that's what you're going to do. And, so that's what I did. And when I walked into Seton Hall Prep, because it was a college prep high school, all they talked about was college. And we were inculcating this idea that college is the way to cultivate your potential. It's a way to access jobs that would enable me to have more economic opportunity than those who came before me, even though they were way smarter than I was. And because I got this scholarship to go to this place called Seton Hall Prep, I'd end up being the first generation college graduate, and have now been able to break this intergenerational cycle of poverty that my ancestors who were so much more smart, more talented, more enabled because they didn't have the opportunity. And so I'm very passionate about the idea of education being a space to break cycles of poverty, to address issues of intergenerational racism. I love the idea of college and career because I think there are some who have an or approach, and that or tends to be for the privileged, you go to college. For low-income communities of color, you go do something else, and then we'll see if HVAC and cosmetology and electrical can find you a decent job. And we really know that's not really the case. And it tends to perpetuate the very cycles we say we're here to break. So I love the idea of college and career. I love the idea of what Maria said in terms of working with our colleges to reimagine the college experience beyond just residential, and working to infuse careers, strong jobs, skills training into the pathways that also lead to a college degree.
So I heard a couple of themes consistent with all three of you. I heard about families, and I heard about opportunity. You all talked about opportunity. The brochure that comes in the mail that is addressed to you. So if it's addressed to you, it must mean that it's meant for you. And we also know that we're not going to get in America to where we need to get unless we open up those doors and bring in those people that we're missing. So now from the personal to the more strategic, or how are we going to do that? How are we going to reach out to the people who are not getting the message or the opportunities, and need to know that this is for them as well? And Shavar, I'd like to start with you on that.
Yeah, well, I think we need the three sectors we represent to work together. I mean, first and foremost, so the hat I wear, K-12, we got to be excellent, and we're not. And we're not, particularly in the context of public schools that serve low-income students. Frankly, even middle-class white students aren't really getting excellence either, but I'll let other people honestly focus on that. I'm focused on low-income students, including low-income white students as well, but I'm focused on low-income students. They're absolutely not getting excellence from K-12 public education. And so as a country, we need to make sure we're making the investments across the variety of different domains that we need to, whether it's investing to make sure teachers are paid at the level that they deserve to be paid, making sure we have world-class teacher prep, so that teachers are ready to do great things for kids in the classroom, make sure we have evidence-based curricula rooted in what the research says works for most kids most of the time. So I think K-12, we have a critical role to play so that when kids leave 12th grade, they're ready for the most promising opportunities in post-secondary. Clearly, our post-secondary community and our colleges and universities, as Maria suggests, have to reimagine and modernize what the college experience looks like, more local, flexible, affordable options that can serve kids more broadly are critical. And of course, we need our colleagues in business, to the points that we're talking about, to really think through what skills are required, making sure those conversations are had with higher ed and K-12 so that we're infusing that into our curriculum. And then making sure we don't have these, frankly, biased gatekeeping mechanisms that really aren't connected to what the business really needs, but we know they work in practice to exclude large numbers of young people, particularly low-income kids of color, from these opportunities.
So let me pick up on the bias gatekeeping. Let's say all goes well in K-12, and now you're ready to send those students out the door, and now they end up at the door of Arizona State or another great university. What does the university do to make sure that those students are successful? And let's tie it back to that career piece.
Yeah. Well, I think thing one is making sure that the door is wide open. Right? I was just in a panel earlier this morning where they talked about 160,000 applications for their less than 10,000 spots. And so thing one is like, how do we just create more capacity, more spots? So I think that's thing one. So ASU is focused on that, and our charter is about inclusion. And so as long as you meet the minimum criteria that we think that means you're college ready, we will create a spot for you. We think that access piece is really critical, but that it's not just the access piece. Then it's like, well, what are you actually learning? I think in many conversations about college, we've almost forgotten the learning part of it, right? It's just about getting into college, et cetera. We're like, what about the actual education that you're getting in college? And that's where working with Grow with Google has been so amazing, because we've been thinking about how to embed career-oriented education right into our college courses. So we have several ASU courses that also include the Google certificates. And so that allows people to be both on a career track and a college track, and you don't have to pick one or the other.
Well, since you brought up the Google certificates, let me turn to Lisa. Tell us how that came about and what it means to create a sustainable and scalable model for those.
Yeah. It's interesting, I mentioned earlier the statistic, this incredible mismatch between what good paying jobs say they require and what most Americans have. And that was initially our kind of laser focus. And we've been doing these certificates for a handful of years now and have graduated hundreds of thousands of people already, so a massive scale. But one of the things that was interesting is early on when we launched our very first certificate, we saw in the data from our graduates that about 40% of them actually had college degrees. And we were like, oh my gosh, that's not what we were designing for. Like, is that a feature or a bug, as we like to say in tech? And it turns out it's actually, it taught us about a feature, meaning it's a good thing. So when we thought people were behaving irrationally, like, who needs our certificate if you have a college degree? Aren't you set? Well, some of the folks in this room might know some data that says about 41% of people who are graduating today with a bachelor's degree are ending up what's called underemployed, which means they're working in a job that doesn't require a degree. So probably not a great job. And the data actually shows, if you look at Lightcast data, that if you combine a 4-year bachelor's degree with a high-quality industry-recognized credential, you will actually become dramatically more employable and much higher wages. So these 40% of people who were taking our certificate were actually behaving really rationally. So we took a step back and always listen to the user as part of how we operate at Google, and we said, wow, we're missing out at helping lots of other people that we could be helping. And so that's when we started partnering with universities like ASU. But also we're partnering at a really big scale now. We announced in December a partnership with the University of Texas higher ed system and the Texas State higher ed system, which I think is the 3rd largest system in the country, hundreds of thousands of students. And they're implementing the Google Career Certificates and offering it to all of their students. And so as we've started to engage and really and see different pathways, we now have 6 different ways we work with universities, from for credit to not credit, from alumni programs. Rutgers offers the Google Career Certificate to every alumni for free as part of their lifelong learning commitment, to community colleges. So we've always really embraced community colleges are such a bedrock of our workforce development system in this country. And places like Dallas College have already graduated 500 people just with one of our certificates. So we're really seeing all kinds of models in education. And excitingly, we're now invested in high schools. The Anaheim Public Schools will graduate about 600 kids with the Google Career Certificates this year. This is their first year, so I think it'll be even significantly more next year. And cities like Cincinnati are also bringing it to the high school systems.
That's great.
So some of your students some of the learners are taking, have a college degree and are taking their certificate, and some of them don't have a college degree, which is something, just to pick up on something that Shavar said, which kind of worries me. Are we moving towards a new kind of tracking where the affluent kids get the liberal arts and the critical thinking and the all that good stuff that we think gets packaged with a college degree, and low-income kids, or too many of them, potentially get tracked into what we used to call vocational, except I have taken a solemn oath never to use the word vocational. Or do they end up in only career-oriented programs? Is that something we should worry about?
I think we should. I mean, that's why I really love the premise for this conversation, college and career, because I think much of the conversation we have in the country is rooted in career education as an alternative to college, with the idea that everybody, some would say, why does everybody have to go to college? Some kids may not, quote, want to go to college. And oftentimes in those conversations, the kids that want to go to college, it tends to be those kids who have privilege. And the kids who don't want to go to college, tend to be those kids who don't have privilege. Where I'm from, the kids aren't, I grew up, I wasn't exposed to college. So if somebody said at 15, do you want to go, before I got to Seton Prep, 13, do you want to go to college? I would have said no, because I don't even know what that is. Right? So part of what we're here to do and the work we're here to do is to expand the horizons of young people, not at a young age tether what is possible for them based upon what they've seen. And we know for our young people, oftentimes what they've seen is constructed by concentrated poverty, constructed by intergenerational racism. They don't see hedge fund managers. They don't see neuroscientists. So to say, what do you choose to do, oftentimes can just be a space to replicate what they may have seen, which isn't connected to the full sense of their possibilities. So I'm very concerned about that. And so I believe the college and career framework is where we ought to be. And frankly, we also have to be thoughtful about the extent to which it's great that many employers now are reimagining the extent to which a college credential is required for certain jobs. What I'm worried about as a civil rights attorney is generally black and brown people got to be more qualified. So I'm very worried that no matter what, frankly, any employer says, this is just my skepticism from my experience and from the history, that you can say all that type of stuff. When I send my babies, they're probably gonna need more credentials, right? And so I want to see the data as well, that as these employers are reimagining what jobs theoretically don't require a degree, who's actually getting those opportunities, so we can make sure it's not reproducing the inequities we're here to address.
And
How
Anna,
can I be it if I've never seen it, right? The phrase.
I was going to add that I think that's why it's important for colleges to take the responsibility and universities to take the responsibility to create more optionality. Because basically what we're telling our students now is, unless you can go full-time and move away and live in a residential, you don't get to have a college degree, right? And so I think at ASU, we're creating more optionality, more flexibility, more affordability. Because it's only by offering, everyone's in a different situation. So if you're a high school graduate who needs to work full time because that's what your family needs, you should be able to go to college. And most colleges aren't constructed in a way that actually allows you to do that. And so one of the things we've done at ASU, again with the Grow with Google certificate, is even embed these college courses in the high school. You could graduate having that certificate because we acknowledge that some people might have to work. And I'd rather them be working with a Google certificate than having to work somewhere else, late nights, et cetera, because that's the only job they could get. And that doesn't mean, though, and this is why it's important to embed the college piece, because now you already have your college credits. You can be flexible and keep going while you're working. And so those types of optionalities are just really important because we have to acknowledge not everyone can be a full-time student living in the residential area. And at ASU, we have 70,000 online students who are all, many of them are working full-time. We have Starbucks. I see our Starbucks person here from ASU. Starbucks employees, if you are working at Starbucks 20 hours a week, you get to go to ASU for free, right? And it's that type of flexibility that people need. And I heard a woman talk about it just a few months ago where she said she had to move states 5 times She moved to 5 different states, and there were 2 things that were consistent: her Starbucks job and the fact that she could keep going to ASU.
That's great.
What about the college curriculum itself? I mean, the Google certificate exists outside of the college curriculum. I was hearing yesterday a phrase that was new to me, the idea of the skillification of higher education. Have you ever heard that? I'm not sure it's a phrase that's going to stick, but it sounds like, scrambled eggs or something. You're going to put higher ed in a skillet. But is that? I asked you before about whether there's a danger about sort of tracking students. Is it the role of college to? How do we think about the role of college to prepare students for careers? Does that fit into the curriculum, or is it something that always exists outside of it?
I think we're actually seeing a ton of colleges build our certificates right into the coursework. And I think different schools do different things, but I think it certainly fits. Even in the high school program that I was talking about in Anaheim, they've taken our data analytics certificate and they've built it right into the math classes. So those are similar concepts, right? In some ways, it's applied math. And so I actually don't think it's necessarily an or in terms of that it's not part of the curriculum. We also work with the American Council of on Education, and they've recommended our career certificates for college credit. So a lot of schools will give you anywhere from 8 to 15 credits for just doing the Google Career Certificate Program, which really also helps with affordability. That's almost a semester's worth of credit at most schools. So that'll not only give you the skills you need, but take several $1,000s off of your college bill.
What about some of the best practices that ASU has been pursuing for career credentials, for opening up college? I'm a big fan of Study Hall, which I think has a unique perspective there. Can I tee that up for you?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to talk about Study Hall. Well, Study Hall has several components. I think one, going back to the black box of higher ed, part of the Study Hall project is to create a set of YouTube videos that has a How to College series and also a Fast Guides to Majors. And so what that allows is for students to go on YouTube, watch 5-minute videos of what's a college application, what's a FAFSA, what is a political science major, what's an electrical engineering major. And these are things that, as you said, people don't have exposure to. And so how do we make that super accessible? So we've been working with YouTube for a few years now to get those out into the public, and we've had millions of people watch the videos. Another component of the Study Hall project is to basically start the college courses right on YouTube. So back to exposure, we think that's so important. If you don't know about college, why would you sign up for a college course? And so by allowing you to be able to start it on YouTube for free, completely without any commitment, that really lowers the risk for students that want to see, well, what is this about? Am I going to be successful in this? And so we've seen hundreds of students now sign up for our Study Hall courses on YouTube.
How many of you have seen any of the Study Hall videos? Anybody? Let me ask a different question. How many of you have gone to YouTube to learn something? Okay, I mean, YouTube is essentially the biggest classroom on earth, right? I mean, it's just astonishing that way. So I'm a big fan of what ASU has been doing there. Shavar, and this is not a question we talked about before, but it's sort of a good lead-in from Study Hall. Do you find that your students are learning in different ways, that they're turning to different sources for either studying or just success in their classes?
Yeah, no question, absolutely. We've worked hard to embed some of these different modalities into our programming, into our curriculum. So, in high school, we have a whole KIPP forward approach where we teach kids, we have conversation with kids, and we embed into our curriculum, and we'll use multimedia supports as well to talk about careers, to begin to expose kids even in 9th and 10th grade around a range of different careers. So begin to address this exposure gap and to have conversations not only about their interests, but of the range of possibilities that may exist that they may not know about. And we have a variety of different programs. We have some programs where kids are in high school, they can actually get a job and they can have applied learning in a workplace. not only in terms of the technical matters associated with the work that they're doing, but learning how to show up and learning how to engage and socialize and work with coworkers and work with supervisors. We have dual enrollment programs as well that can begin to expose kids even while they're in high school to what it is to be on a college campus. And we generally pursue dual enrollment programs. We're actually taking college courses, right, rather than some sort of watered down, sort of approach. So we've worked hard to embed into the work we do, even in, frankly, middle school, to begin to have conversations with our kids, to expose them to different careers, to have field trips to different businesses where kids can kind of get a more specific and concrete sense of what may be possible for them.
When you think about public perception of higher education, every poll I see there, the trends don't look so good, right? There's growing concern about the value of the college degree. So do you feel like we're getting the message across that we may think that we've gone from either or to both and, but the public perception is increasingly that college is out of touch and not getting it done? What do you think, Maria?
I don't think we have, and just the stats show that we have not. So we have, I think I was reading last week that since 2010, community college enrollment has gone down by 37%. Wow. That's a giant number, right? And then we have our four-year colleges getting more and more exclusive and bragging about how few people they let in. So here we are making it harder for people to get in, then people are not enrolling, and so I think it's up to universities and colleges to remember that we're in the business of education, not in the business of forcing people to go to a certain location or a certain time of day. Right? And so that means opening our mind to, well, what does it mean to be in the business of education? How do we make that accessible for folks? And so until we do that more across the whole country, I think there's some institutions out there that are doing it. A lot of them are here today. But what about how many other universities do you see at this event? Not many. And so until we have the majority of our universities thinking about how to be more accessible, more scalable, more flexible, I think we're going to continue to see these downward trends.
I dragged a higher education leader to this conference. This was about 3 years ago, just pre-COVID, and he had a pretty good time. And then I asked, well, are you going to go next year? And he said, no, it's not for me. And I think that's kind of the attitude that, and again, this, interrelatedness of post-secondary, K-12, and business really changes that perception. So let's say we reverse that trend. We're enormously successful. What does success look like? What does success look like to you, Shavar?
Success looks like to me that every child, every baby has access to an opportunity to fulfill their potential, and for low-income kids to break cycles of poverty. Education ought to be a pathway to not only enable human beings to flourish and to fulfill everything that's inside of them, but also believe it ought to be connected to the ability to have economic security and economic justice. And so my view is we will have solved this challenge when every child in this country has access to an education that enables them to flourish and to break cycles of poverty and achieve economic security.
Lisa, I'm going to ask you the same question, but I would also love if you would reflect a little bit on what it's like to work with universities, on what that partnership is like, what are the obstacles, what are the challenges, and where do you feel like it works best?
So first, +1 to that.
Absolutely.
I think that's what we're all solving for. It depends on the university, I think. And there's amazing universities like ASU who have always been about inclusion and have always been leading the way. But I think what's also exciting is when you see giant systems like the University of Texas and Texas State systems stepping in. And I don't think anyone would have thought that was a no-brainer a few years ago. But that's a really big deal, right? Those are very prestigious, very good schools saying, hey, guess what? We want to make sure that our students have an opportunity to get a great career and get out the gates well. We all know that all the research says that your first few years of your career are actually very material to your long-term outcomes. And it's so exciting to me to see people, stepping up. Purdue University is another great example. I think I mentioned Rutgers. Like every week we're talking to additional universities who are just super eager either to build it into the coursework or offer it to students in another way. And I think that will deliver the best outcomes for everyone, right?
Is there any crossover from the instructional design or pedagogy of your certificates? And, are any of the colleges learning anything about the rest of how they deliver content outside of tech? Do you think you're going to influence college pedagogy?
I don't know. I think we have to learn from each other. I think there's tons of things that these universities are outstanding at, and there's nothing like having a professor in the room with you, right? We do ours all online on demand because, as Maria said, working adults need it that way. Most 20-ish% of Americans don't know their work schedule for next week, and they certainly don't control it. And if you don't know or control your work schedule, you may not be able to commit to be in a classroom, no matter how committed you are to doing so. So we have to do online on demand, and that has lots of benefits. It means we can do it in an entirely scalable, sustainable way and graduate hundreds of thousands of people in just a few years. But it's great if you can have a professor or a TA who's there to help you through it too. So I think we have a lot to learn from each other.
Maria?
Yeah, I think lots of people talk about this demographic cliff, but I think that's actually until they'll say, well, there's less demand for college in the future than now. And I think what that plans for is basically the continuation of our systemic racism and inequities. Because if everyone was graduating at the same rates and going to college at the same rates, we would actually need like 2x the amount of capacity and education for people. And so I believe in planning for an equitable future, right? And that means including everyone. And so at ASU, part of the group I run, the Learning Enterprise, is focused on providing social and economic opportunities for people across their entire lifetime. So going back to Shavar, it starts at the very beginning, and you need to, even after you graduate, there's 50 years of career, and given how quickly things are evolving, I mean, even I'm having to learn every single day on what's going on with ChatGPT and how do I get up to speed on that. And so we are creating courses for every level of learner throughout their entire lifetime.
That's great.
If you look ahead, do you see? I mean, you mentioned AI, which obviously is going to have a transformative impact on, or at least I think is going to have. How many of you think AI is going to have a transformative impact on higher education? Okay, phew, at least some of you do think so. What other changes do you see sort of coming down the pike that may accelerate the sort of good work that you all are doing in your areas or slow us down?
Well, I'll jump in with, I think that AI will have great positive impacts, but people are going to have to really design carefully. And so at ASU, for example, we've already started a group with the vision of using AI to harness the knowledge of the world and provide everyone with abundance and creativity. And like we've explicitly put a vision statement out there about how we want to see it out in the world, because we know that design starts from like the very beginning in their very vision. And so you could see, lots of folks have these horror visions of what AI could do. But the best thing you can do to foresee the future is create it, right? And so I think just taking ownership of, well, how do we embed AI in a super equitable way where you're actually providing a lot more personalized learning for people. Now you can provide personalized tutoring and coaching, and then there's all these, I think, amazing ways that it will actually really benefit learners from an accessibility standpoint.
Also, I think from a job search perspective, so way before anyone was talking about ChatGPT, like a year ago, we launched an interview practice tool built on AI. Because interviewing is in and of itself a skill, and so it's something that actually requires practice. But a lot of people don't have an easy way to practice. So we made an online tool. It's powered by AI, where you can actually practice interviewing, and it takes you kind of through interview, and it gives you feedback on your answers to make everyone better at like the skill of interviewing,
So
which
cool.
is a gateway to jobs. So.
That's great.
I'm excited about the prospect of innovative learning models to make the job of teaching much easier and to therefore make the job of learning for students less variable, more consistent, more scalable. Obviously, there's tons of ed tech and other providers and other innovators in this space who are working to reimagine the student-teacher experience in a way that can make an extremely difficult job that our amazing teachers have less difficult and more efficient. And so I'm excited for some of these innovators to have some breakthroughs so that I've heard people use the metaphor of flying planes, where at a certain period of time, you needed a certain skill set to fly a plane consistently, and now it's a dramatically easier job because of technological advancements. We really need that K-12, particularly given challenges we're having with teacher shortages, challenges we're having with persuading policymakers to invest in our teachers the way that we need to. So to the extent we can get some innovations in tech and in other spaces that can make this job less challenging, that would be great for kids.
Well, somewhere out there is a tech entrepreneur, an ed tech entrepreneur who hopefully will accomplish that. But as you say, the pace of change is just getting faster and faster, which means that the skills to keep up with jobs is going to be harder and harder. So your jobs are going to get that much harder. How do you keep your ear to the ground? How do you adapt so that you are continually at least a half a step ahead of your students as they think about your students, your employees, your college students as they think about the future?
That's difficult. That's difficult. Part of what I try to do in the role I have is to make sure I'm in spaces like this on a regular basis, to make sure I'm very proximate to our communities and our families to understand what they're dealing with. And our kids have their backs against the wall in the aftermath of the pandemic. As we know from the National Assessment of Education Progress, we lost about 30 years of academic gains given pandemic-related school closure. And that's before you get to what's happening in our communities and the challenges that our children, our families are dealing with in terms of economic dislocations, increasing cultural isolation in many of our communities, levels of violence. So I work very hard, not only to be very proximate to these spaces, where innovators are imagining what the future of education ought to look like, then I work extremely hard to make sure I'm very, very proximate to what it is our kids, our families are dealing with, so that we can hopefully marry what it is that our constituencies are facing in a way that can create sustainable solutions.
Lisa, how many new certificates do you come up with, or how often do you refresh your curriculum?
Pretty often. We launched 2 like 2 weeks ago. 2 more. We have 8 certificates
What were they
now. They're in advanced data analytics and business intelligence. Our data analytics certificate is the #1 global professional certificate. And we saw such a demand. As a matter of fact, like McKinsey recently published some research that says that the biggest skills gap in the world is the data analytics skills. And the demand for data analytics skills is growing at 15 times the rate of the demand for the average other skills. So we really saw an opportunity to kind of build on the basics, and now we have the advanced data analytics and business intelligence. So our goal is to really find these places where there are in-demand, high-growth career fields that pay well, where we know we can teach people in a very accessible, affordable way, and where Google has real expertise to contribute. So lots more to come.
Great. Maria?
Well, I think research universities have a unique role in the sense that knowledge is evolving every single day. And so part of our role as research universities is to be able to take exactly what's coming out, the latest cutting edge knowledge, and then turn it into accessible content and curriculum for people, right? So it's not, you can't keep using the same curriculum when we know things are changing at a super rapid pace. We have to constantly evolve the curriculum, and that's one of the reasons we love that our research faculty are the ones teaching our career upskilling courses. They are the ones that are teaching our college pathway courses in high schools, because that's the type of knowledge creators that are going to keep kind of the knowledge current and fresh, which is what our learners need.
So as you, and I guess this will be our last question, as you look back on this past year, post-pandemic, if we are in fact post-pandemic, it would be nice to think so, and then look ahead, what are your sort of North Stars for what your different organizations are going to do that specifically address this, the end of the dichotomy, moving from the either or to the both and?
Well, I know we have 30 seconds left, so I'll say more optionality, not less. I think that's the key for me is create more options for people. We do not need less options. We need more options.
I love that. I think, no doubt a college degree is a pathway to a better life. Just can't be the only pathway. And so I think partnering with educational institutions, K-12, through university is what we're invested in now.
And we're focused on, we want all 120,000 students we serve to be college and career ready, so that Google would be blessed to have any one of our students, that the colleges today and the college of tomorrow that are hopefully more rooted in local, flexible options, that our kids are ready for that. So I want all of our kids ready for next level opportunities post-secondary.
Terrific. Join me in thanking our panel.